Hello, everybody. It is Jodie Thornton here. We are on the Getting Strong-Willed Kids to Listen webinar today. I am just about to get started, so let's let's move into it. So, we'll get started with an acknowledgement of country. So, I acknowledge the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples as the custodians of the lands, waterways, and sky from where I am today. Where I am is a place that you might know as Canberra in Australia. This land was never ceded. So the sovereignty on these lands was never ceded. And the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples are the ongoing custodians of these lands. And I pay respects to the past and present Ngunnawal and Ngambri elders. And one of the things I just wanted to bring in as well is that there's a way, sometimes when we do acknowledgements of country, it, it it seems a little hollow because we're just saying something. And you may have seen the example that people have talked about where a teacher takes a water bottle from one of the students and then says, I acknowledge that this is Jodie's water bottle. And then like nothing happens, right? And so it's like an acknowledgement that something has happened, but not any action taken to restore what has gone on. And so I also like to mention that there is a way for people who are so inclined to help. Like there's many ways, but one of the ways that I think is quite relevant to what we're talking about tonight is to support Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children to be educated in their own language, which there's a great organization called Children's Ground who have a lot of initiatives to make sure that children are getting access to education in their own language, which not only helps a child to preserve their own culture, but it also helps even just to keep the languages alive. A lot of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander languages are under threat of just people not knowing the languages and actually going extinct. And we want to make sure that that language loss doesn't happen, as well as immense cultural benefits for children to be educated in community. So if you'd like to support that work, you can check out Children's Ground at childrensground.org. So to get to know me, my name is Jodie Thornton. I have four kids who are 26, 23, 11, and 9, and a granddaughter who's just turned 3 last Friday. We are a blended family. So I met my now husband when our oldest two were 5 and 8, and have been, involved in their lives since then. I, along the lines, look, because we're a blended family, along the lines have accessed a lot of support from psychologists and social workers over the years. But I often felt that while those social workers and psychologists were helping me to understand, like, the dynamics of a blended family and also helping me to understand how my childhood influenced how I saw things, they didn't seem to be giving me the skills to be able, like the actual parenting skills. And I found it really hard to find that advice of how to handle the basic situations like the kids are not listening, which is what we're talking about tonight, or the kids are having big feelings. And it just felt like there wasn't a lot of resources that helped you to know, like, is what you're doing actually helping them to understand their emotions and helping them to build the skills they need for later in life, like the emotional and communication skills they needed for later in life. And so that's kind of how I ended up in this work. Um, I am also healing the bossy slash people pleaser cycle. I am definitely a strong-willed child, or was a strong-willed child who has turned into a strong-willed adult. And I think that because of that strong-willed nature, I'm still in that process of recognizing when am I coming in too strong and not taking account of what everybody else needs, and when am I acquiescing and not really even noticing. For me, I'm now at the point where when I notice it, I've made shifts, but when I don't even notice that I'm people pleasing because it's so ingrained in our culture and ingrained in many of our childhoods. And so that's something that I'm still working through as things go on. So today we are going to be looking at how to ask your child to listen to give them the best chance of listening for the right reasons. When that doesn't work, how to shift the vibe into teamwork, and what to do when none of this works, and how to keep your cool. So I'd love to know, what is your biggest challenge when it comes to getting your kids to listen? The most common issues that I hear from parents are, well, I prioritize what they need and want as much as possible, but some things just need to happen. And why does it need to be this hard all the time? So things like teeth brushing or getting in the car or getting, dressed warmly to be at the park in the winter, or, there's all these places where it's like, I can't actually, I can actually prioritize your needs any further. This is as far as we can go, and we just need to make it happen. Another thing that I hear from parents is, I don't want them to comply. Like, I don't want them to grow up as someone who just complies with what everyone else wants. But I also worry that giving in to them all the time will make them think that they should always get their way. Like, where is the line? I worry that if I make them think listening is the only way to be a good person, that they'll become people pleasers. I worry that harsh approaches will mean that they lose the qualities that will serve them well in adulthood. Another one is, out of desperation, I have tried everything, including stuff I am not comfortable with. And no matter whether I follow the gentle parenting strategies perfectly or do the old school harsh approaches, it doesn't actually matter because none of it works anyways. And then the last one is that they don't listen, and I try to stay calm, but I end up losing my cool anyway, and I just end up being reactive instead of responsive. And so when we think about this, we want to look at, like, why do we need a values aligned way to get them to listen? Like, why can't we just wait until they're older and they've got more ability to understand logic? Or why can't we just wait until they've got the skills to really communicate differently? Or why don't we just go with some of those old school strategies in the assumption that they work for your child? And here are the reasons why we really want to shift this. The first one is that if we do not get a way for them to listen, you will either lose your cool or repress your feelings, one or the other. Obviously, we know we don't want to be losing our cool consistently with our kids. That's not awesome. And the only alternative you have really is to repress your feelings. And to be honest, I see a lot of gentle parenting approaches that basically say that that's actually not such a bad thing, that you can just repress your feelings. And they don't use those words. They'll say things like, it's important for you to stay calm, and it's important that your feelings are not your child's responsibility. Or they'll say these things, but ultimately, what else is it? If they're not giving you an option that actually addresses your feelings, then you are repressing your feelings. And when you repress your feelings, what happens? Often you can only repress for so long before it comes out. And even if you got really good at it, you just repressed really well, the amount of emotional energy it takes to repress your feelings means you cannot be attuned to your child. You can't, right? And so that being said, and like you're just not going to be parenting in the way that you're comfortable with if you are relying on repressing your feelings. It's just impossible to do those two things together. The other thing that can happen is that you'll spend so much time either getting them to listen or dealing with the fact that they aren't listening, that you'll just be exhausted or unable to stick to your values, and you're losing time to create a deeper relationship. Like, if you're spending so much time having to have a negotiation every time you need to get in the car, or every time they have to get a coat on, or every time they're having to go to bed, like, it's just taking up so much time and energy that it's just not, we're just missing out on so many opportunities for relaxation, for peace, for building a deeper connection, for getting along together, creating memories. Like, we're just losing so much time if we allow this to keep going on. Now, eventually, if we just do nothing, if we just keep our cool / repress our feelings, if we just do that, and even if we consistently keep losing our cool, eventually your child will learn to be stronger in my way or the highway, or they'll slip into people pleasing. And as I expressed at the beginning of the webinar, I learned both of those things, right? I learned that there were times where it was safe and comfortable for me to just say, look, it's my way or the highway, and you can get on board or not. It's not really my issue. And I also learned that there were times when the best option was to be a people pleaser, and that, like, as I say, is so ingrained for me that I'm still finding, like, there was a time where I would have told you I was never a people pleaser. I always just did what was important to me. Then I realized, actually, I've got some people pleasing tendencies. I thought I addressed those, and then some years later, I find even more like because I've repressed my feelings so much, I didn't even notice I was people pleasing, right? And so what we want to do is make sure that we don't just wait and then find that our kids end up just building the muscles of being stronger in just having things their way and or stronger in their ability to people please. We don't want either of those two outcomes. Reason that they'll end up in those two outcomes is it's kind of like the most, if we don't have a healthy way, those are kind of the only two other options. And also those are the most common ways that people deal with problems in our culture. It's basically either I'm in charge, so you'll do what I say, or I am right, so you'll do what I say, or like I'll acquiesce because that's the best thing for me to do. Those are really the two ways that we solve problems. It's my turn to acquiesce, or it's appropriate for me to acquiesce. Those are really the two ways that we problem solve in our culture for the most part. And we want to shift that. We don't want our kids growing up to reinforce that part of the culture. Now, the other thing is that these moments where our children and us are having conflict, right? Where we want them to listen and they don't want to. These are the very moments where we get to demonstrate that they can trust us to help them solve problems. So they can deeply know they can come to us with their problems later in life, no matter what. Even if it's a difficult problem, even if it's something that they're in the wrong, right? They've done something they're not proud of. They know that we will help them, not by taking over, not by telling them to do something that they're not comfortable with, not by judging them or criticizing them, but actually by supporting them to solve the problems. And so the younger we get in, so it's never too late, right? No matter how old your child is, if you're watching this and if you're having a tough time and you need to do this process later, it's never too late. But the younger we get in with this, the much better they are at knowing that they can come to us. It also just makes them better at solving problems for themselves, like in their own way, whenever they have conflict. Like these are the skills. The more years of practice they have, the better they will do in their relationships with us and their relationships with other people. So if we look about why the standard approaches suck, I would categorize them all under these headings. So the first one would be, we help them want what we want, right? We help them to see that it makes sense that we would clean up as often as we clean up, even though that's kind of arbitrary because every house has different rules about how tidy it and how often, right? We help them to see that it would be considerate and kind and do the right thing, right? As we're like helping them to see that they should want what we want. Another category is we make them uncomfortable enough. So definitely the old school approaches work with this is like, I'm going to give you consequences. I'm going to give you, I'm going to help you understand how you'll be a bad person, right? But just make them uncomfortable enough that they will do what we ask them to. The next category is we're giving them something that they want badly enough. So either we tie what we want them to do to something that's important to them, or we do something like giving them rewards, right? We're giving them, whether it's praise or sticker charts or buying toys or whatever the thing is. It's like, you can have what you really want if you do what I ask you to. The next one, much more in the gentle parenting spaces, is you'll see a lot of people saying if they're not doing what you're asking them to do, how much one-on-one time are you giving them? Have you filled their cup, right? It's like if you give them enough connection, then they'll do what you ask. The last one is giving them the illusion of control. So we make it seem like it's their choice, but really we're setting them up in a way that it's actually not their choice, but we're trying to tell them that this is your choice. And all of these categories, all of them, the intention is we do these things to get them to let go of what they want. We get our child to let go of what they want, which of course is extremely difficult if you're a strong-willed child, and it just doesn't work. And that's why we see so consistently, we see that no matter, and that phrase that I said in the beginning of I've deserted to everything. Like I've tried things I'm not comfortable with. It doesn't work anyways, right? Because our children are the ones who find it difficult to let go of what they want. So if we're using any of the approaches that use these lenses, it's not going to work because they are going to say, I'm not letting go of what I want. That's not for me. And ultimately, we actually don't want them to acquiesce, right? We don't want them to learn when is it the right time for me to let go of what I need? When is the right time for me to not have needs? When is the right time for me to defer to what is important to everybody else? We want them to get what they want. We just also want other people to get what they want. And then there's other examples where it's actually about balancing all of their needs. So one example is we want them to have autonomy over their time, but also we need their teeth to be brushed, right? So it's like, it's not just about what other people need, but sometimes it's like making sure that they're not sacrificing one of their needs in order to meet their other needs, right? So this is the thing, we don't want them to acquiesce, but we do need them to be able to be considerate of other people that are involved and also considerate of the full spectrum of their needs in the short and long term, not just the things that are the shiniest or the most exciting or the most immediate. So our very first thing to do is we want to avoid the power struggle. So a lot of the reasons why a strong-willed child will straight up refuse in the beginning is because it feels like it's arbitrary. You have decided that this is what I'll do, but how about I don't want that, right? And so what we want to do is ask them in a way that avoids that power struggle. We're going to say, what do you want them to do and why do you want them to do it? And we want to be clear that we're using the real reason. And I'm going to go back to that tidying up example. If you say, you need to tidy up after yourself because it's important that everybody tidies up after themselves, that is not the real reason. And the reason I say that is because, like, in every household, there's different rules about what is the standard of tidy that is acceptable, and also how often the house needs to be at that standard of tidy, right? And so what is the real reason? Do you need the lounge room to be tidy in order to be able to relax? Are you worried that you're going to get hurt because you're tired of stepping on toys? Are you worried that expensive toys are going to get broken because they're out and people will fall over them? Are you worried that the baby is going to choke on something that is too small for them to, like they'll try to swallow it and it will be too big for them, right? Like, we want to look at what is the real reason. And then the last thing there is, are you asking or are you telling? So a big way we get into a power struggle is when there actually isn't a choice, we're asking, would you like to clean up now for dinner? No, I don't. Right? You're asking, and we want to ask because it's better if they choose for themselves. But ultimately, if there is no choice, we're setting it up to be a power struggle. And strong-willed kids will definitely want to communicate to you that actually that doesn't work for them. But also, if you have been using any form of gentle parenting, so even if it's just mildly more gentle than what it was for the previous generation, you will find that your child knows that what they like, their emotions and their desires and needs are important to you. So if you ask them to do something that then they don't want to do, they're just going to be like, no, you don't understand. I don't want this, right? Because they know that their needs are deeply important to you. So if you're asking them to do something, clearly you just haven't understood, right? And so we just want to go back to the what do you want them to do and why do you want them to do it? So if we can practice asking, we use a couple of examples. So the cleaning up is one. Another one might be going to bed, right? It's time to lay down and go to sleep now, right? Now, why? It's time to lay down and go to sleep now because I can see that your body is getting tired. I can see from the way your eyes are drooping, or I can hear in the tone of your voice. I notice that when you get tired, your voice starts to change, and I know that if we don't get you to sleep on time, it's going to be really hard for you to go to sleep later, right? Another one might be, It's time to go to sleep now. I know that when we haven't gone to sleep at this time in the past, the next morning you've been really tired and it's been a really hard day for both of us. Right. So you can see how I'm getting into why it's even for sleep, it's not a standard answer. Right. It's what is important to you as an individual and what is specific to the situation. Right. Another example is let's say the kids are fighting in the back of the car and you're driving. I the first thing you might be asking is, could you please stop speaking? Right? That could be what you're wanting them to do. Why? Because I find it really hard to concentrate on driving when there's too much yelling. Right? It might be, could you please speak more quietly because I find it really hard to drive safely when when everybody's speaking at high volumes. It could be, could you just ask your sister a question? Could you wait for her to answer before you speak again? Right? We're looking at something really specific. What do you want them to do, and why do you want them to do it? We want to get really clear on those answers and really clear on what the driver is there, because then it's not arbitrary. It's not a power struggle. I have a request, right? And you can, if it's you can make it clear. Am I asking or am I telling? I need you to stop talking so loudly because it's not safe for me to drive when I'm distracted, is different to, would you to be able to speak a little bit more quietly because it's hard for me to concentrate. Now, the difference in the reason I use that is, how difficult is it for me? Can I concentrate and it's okay? Or is it actually dangerous and they need to stop? Right. And I'm being clear. Am I asking or am I telling? And I'm giving the real reason. Now, if you ask and they don't do what you've asked, do not ask again. Right? If you ask again, what are we doing there? We're trying to say, let's come back a minute. If you've asked and they do not do what you want, the only reason for them not doing what you want is because there's a need of theirs that doesn't get met by this. Right. And so if we do anything other than find out what that need is, we're going back to, I want you to let go of what's important to you. I want you to acquiesce your needs. Right. And so if we ask and they don't do what we've asked, our first job is to get them to tell us why. So if we look at a Venn diagram of what's happening, if we've got one circle, which is what you need, and one circle, which is what they need. And the overlap is what works for both of you. And so when you're trying to get them to do just one thing that sits in the circle of what you need, but doesn't sit in the circle of what they need, right? We spend so much time trying to figure out how to get them to do what we want them to do, when we could instead spend our time on finding one of the many options of what will work for both of you. Right. And this is where we want to focus, is when we are asking again, we're getting them to focus on that light blue dot. Right. We're getting them to, please can you X, right? When actually it's much faster, much easier to figure out what is their circle, what is it that they need. So then we can find the overlap, and then we can find one of the solutions that's in that overlap. So where we want to get to is that when someone asks your child to do something, whether it's you or a friend or a sibling, their other parent, anybody, we want them to either do it because they want to, or they respectfully express why they don't want to, so that they can problem solve together with that person. Right. And so as they get older, that will look like holding boundaries sometimes. That will look like expressing that they don't have the time right now, and that they can be available later, but not right now. When they get older, it might come down to knowing who to share what level of detail about their vulnerabilities, right? But in their close relationships, whether it's their romantic relationship, their relationship with you, their friends, their co-workers, their boss at work, like, we want them to be looking at, actually, if something doesn't work for me, let me help you, let me help express this is why this doesn't work for me. And let's see if we can find an option that works for both of us. That way they aren't acquiescing. They aren't learning to shift, whose turn is it to acquiesce. They're learning to connect and problem solve. So in order to get there, we want to ask them why not. So, sweetie, I just asked you to put your shoes on. How come you're not doing that? Now, generally speaking, I use a lot of words. You don't have to use as many words as I am, but all we need to do is get across the point. The point is a request was made. Why are you not doing what I asked, right? Now, the tone is critical here. The way I just did that question, it was like calm and grounded. It doesn't need to be calm and grounded. It doesn't need to be loving. It can be cheeky, it can be all sorts of tones. But what's important is that it can't sound like a criticism in the guise of a question. So if I do that tone, sweetie, I just asked you to put your shoes on. How come you're not doing that? Right? That's a criticism dressed up as a question. It's not a real question. Another tone that doesn't work, it's not a reminder in the guise of a question. Sweetie, I just asked you to put your shoes on. How come you're not doing that? Like, it doesn't sound like I'm interested in your perspective. It sounds like I'm just reminding you, hey, you need to do that. So it doesn't need to be calm and loving. It just needs to convey that you're genuinely interested in their answer. And so if we practice asking them why not. So, sweetie, I asked you to lie down. Why are you not ready to go to sleep? I asked you to speak quietly to your sister. How come you're not doing that? Right. If we go to a different example, teeth brushing. Hey, I asked you to brush your teeth. Why are you not brushing your teeth? Right. I asked you. It's time to get to the dinner table. How come you're still playing with your Lego? Right? We're really just getting into this is what's happening. Why is it not happening? This is what I would like to be happening. Why is it not happening? Now, your child might say, I don't want to, or I don't know. And they also might be too young to express themselves directly in this way, right? Now, I want to start actually first with if they're too young to express themselves that way. When your child does not have the ability to either recognize what they need or to express it, I still want you to ask the question. The reason I still want you to ask the question is because children, I don't know what age this changes, if it changes at all, but young children are much more skilled at receptive language than expressive language, which means that they understand more than what they can communicate. And so sometimes if we wait until we know for sure that they can understand what we're asking, we miss the moment. They have actually been ready to hear the question and we just didn't know. The second reason I like you to ask the question, even if their receptive language is not ready for them to be able to answer the question, is because it gets you in the practice of building the neural connections so that it becomes default, it becomes your first nature. And then the third reason I want you to ask the question is because even if you do not know, even if they can't tell you what their need is, it gets you thinking about what their need is, right? So even if your child can't give you an answer, I still want you to be asking the question. Now, if your child says, I don't want to, or I don't know, right? If you have a guess of what it is that is their need, reflect it back and check if they agree. So, sweetie, I wonder if it's just that you are having so much fun with your Lego and having dinner is not fun. Is that the reason? Okay. Again, remembering I use a lot of words. You don't have to use as many words as I do, but you do need to just get across. I'm wondering if it's this. Do you think that's what it is? Now, if you can't guess either, you can do something like saying, I wonder what it could be. And you can see how that's not like I'm putting pressure on them to come up with an answer. It's basically saying, like, for both of us, I wonder if we could figure something out, right? And that gets them, it invites them to think about it. And it also keeps your brain turning to see if you can come up with it. Now, if you can't get to the bottom of what their need is, I want you to just make a decision about what needs to happen and follow through on that decision. Now, if your child is younger or dysregulated, you might just express, like, we're going to stop playing with the Lego and move to dinner, because if we don't eat now, then we're going to run out of time for books. And I know that that's going to be upsetting for you. So we're going to do it now, right? You can see how I'm not saying, do you think this is a good idea? I'm just saying, look, this is what we're doing. If they're older or they're regulated, then you might say something like, seeing as we don't know why you don't want to do it, but I still need you to be eating your dinner right now. What can we do? Right. Now, in that case, they may say, well, I want to bring my Lego to the table. Personal choice as to whether you're okay with that or not. They might say, and they may just go, look, I just can't, there's no way to do it. And then you need to make a decision, right? So we're just going to open that idea of, like, if there's no solution right now, what can we do? Now, if your child tells you what's going on for them, why they're not doing it, our first job is just to check, have we found an actual need? Because let's say if we do the I'm going to bed, I don't want to go to sleep, right? If your child was to say to you, it's just so boring to go to bed, I just want to play, I just want to stay up and play, right? Now, is it actually a need? Is the need actually about being interesting, or is the need something else? Right. So it could be that they are finding it hard to wind down. It could be that they see another sibling being able to stay up later and they want fairness. Like, why do I have to go to bed now and they don't have to go to bed right now? Right. And so there, like, we would go into, why is that the case? Right. Why do they need to go to bed when the sibling doesn't? Or what can we do to help them to wind down? Right. Now, if it is that it's not interesting, and it becomes a trickier position, right? Because if it's not interesting, how do we make bedtime interesting in a way that is also winding down? Now, that might take some experimentation to get there, right? But that's what, if that is the true need, then we want to look for, how do we make winding down interesting without getting in the way of the winding down process. And these things might sound like pie in the sky, but there are always ways, right? And sometimes it takes some experimentation and sometimes it's tricky, but there are always ways to get to the bottom of it. Now, the next question we have is, are there theoretically a million ways to meet the need? Right? Because if the need, let's say the need is, well, I just need it to be my way, right? Well, so if that need is autonomy, then so long as they are comfortable with the choice, it's not just the one solution on the table, it's many. Then we know it's autonomy. If it's like, no, it has to be the only way I have expressed, then that's not a need, right? We need to get in under that. What is going on underneath of that at a deeper level? The next one is, when you try a strategy that works, does the feeling resolve? So that, do they, like, the typical one that comes up here is connection, right? So if they say they need connection, or they express something in a way that makes you believe that it's connection, if you meet that need of connection, but it just keeps going on and on and on, right? They need more connection and more connection and more connection. Then either it's not the right need, and so many things masquerade as connection. So let's say novelty. So it's much easier for me to have something that's interesting and new when I'm getting connection from my parent, right? It's not about connection. It's the fact that what we're doing is providing me with things that are interesting and novel. Another one is so what we're saying, connection. So another thing that masquerades as connection is fun, right? It's much easier for me to have fun if I'm a kid who enjoys hanging out with my parent. It's not connection, it's fun. You can have fun independently if you know how and you're practiced at doing it, right? Lots of different things can masquerade as connection, and people will make out that connection is the be all and end all. And yes, connection is a big need, but a lot of other needs can be fitting under what seems to be connection. Now, sometimes a strategy doesn't work for your child as an individual. So it kind of feels like it's working, but not really. And in that case, we just want to try a different strategy and just see if that works. But ultimately, if it feels like a bottomless pit of need, probably we're working on a need that's not the right one. Now, commonly misunderstood needs, I've just been talking about attention connection. So, talking about connection. So if we talk about attention connection, so a lot of gentle parenting people will say, if your child is doing something that's attention seeking, it's actually connection. Not necessarily. Maybe, right? It's possible. But also, if your child is doing attention seeking behavior, maybe they are just frustrated and don't know how to work through the frustration. And by getting attention, someone will help them to solve the problem. That's not connection, right? And you may do it in a connecting way for sure. But if the issue is, I don't know how to solve my problem, so therefore I'm going to draw on a wall, right? It's not necessarily connection. It's like, I'm expressing to you that my problem is not solved and I want you to help me solve the problem, right? Another one is that autonomy. So again, that piece about it being their way. If they are really focused on things needing to be their way or just refusing flat out, then sometimes it's autonomy, which would be, as I said, that would be the piece where if they are comfortable or they're part of the process of coming up with the option. But often what is seen as needing their way or what is seen as needing autonomy is just that what we're trying to do is get them to acquiesce. Right? We're actually not recognizing what is the need that's at play here. We're not finding a solution that meets the need that's at play. And so if we practice identifying the need, so let's say we have a child who doesn't want to brush their teeth. If they say, yeah, I don't want to, right? It might be, what is it like for you, the sensation? What does it feel like when you put the toothbrush on your teeth? I hate it. Oh, so it's not comfortable, right? So then we can find a way that's comfortable. Now, in the case of teeth brushing, often there's, if a child has sensory aversions to teeth brushing, sometimes how we achieve comfort is by playing songs or singing, or you do something silly and it's like distraction from the discomfort. And sometimes it's things like a different toothbrush or a different toothpaste, right? Now, a different option with toothbrushing. So I don't want to brush my teeth. Or in 5 minutes. Oh, sweetie, why aren't you brushing your teeth? I just need 5 more minutes. What that might be is, I don't want to go to bed. And so by not brushing my teeth, I don't have to go to bed. Right. And so the need there is actually to do with bedtime. Why don't you want to go to bed? Right. So that's this part is we really want to get practice at asking good questions, exploring their perspective, and finding that underlying need. And remember, once we've got clarity on what they need and clarity what we need, we want to look for what works for both of you. Now, the vast majority of the time, I'm just going to see, the vast majority of the time, everybody's needs can be met at the same time. The reason it's not possible is that either we don't have enough time to solve that problem, or we're not practiced at finding the solution, right? And so, I'm sure there are rare times where we can't actually meet everybody's needs. It's impossible. But I want you to approach this from the perspective of, it is possible to figure it out. Maybe we will not be able to figure it out today because maybe we're not 100% sure. Maybe we're not practiced at solving the problem. But we want to approach it from the perspective of, it is possible to get this done in a way that works for both of us. And then we're going to actually start using our strong-willed kids' strengths. Strong-willed kids are extremely creative problem solvers. These are the kids that come up with the most random ideas that will actually work. The more you give them the reasons why the the reasons why what they're proposing doesn't work, or the more clarity you can give them on what it is that you need in order to be comfortable with the solution, the more creative a solution that they will come up with. Now, kids have more time than we have, they have more energy than we have, and also they have so much more creativity available to them because they're not yet set in decades of conditioning. And so they have far more ability to come up with solutions. So putting it to them, so this is what I need, this is what you need, or this is what these are your two needs that we need to balance. What can we do? Like really putting it to them, the more practice they get, the quicker they'll be able to do it. We really want to get there. And then they also have so much persistence, right? I don't even need to tell you. They will figure it out. We just need to help them with the parameters that they need to consider, and also make sure that they understand that like you are trying to work with them. Now, strong-willed kids are actually the kids who are able to sit with big frustrations and big feelings. Now, some parents will say, yeah, but not mine. It's a capability that all strong-willed kids have, and or I should say, all children have it. Strong-willed children learn the fastest, right? And so if your child doesn't already have the ability to sit with frustrations or big feelings, they can learn quickly. That's something that you can teach them to do. And so then the ability to be comfortable with the fact that I'm being told I must X, or I know I can't do Y, the ability to sit with that and then keep thinking creatively and find a solution that works for both of them, they are the kids that will be the quickest. And like I honestly say this to you, that the most fun to work with because they are the quickest to pick up the skills. They're the quickest to learn how to sit with the frustration and the big feelings around there not being a solution. So if we go through some examples, so we've been talking about going to bed. We really want to look for what is the what is the reason they don't want to do it, right? And once you can figure out what the reason is, then you can get started on the problem solving. Now, sometimes it's particularly going to bed, sometimes it's not that easy to find a solution, because if it's things like winding down, that's such a physical process. It's not really as controllable as other things. And so sometimes it can take some experimentation. But once you're at least aware of why they don't want to go to sleep, and I know it might sound funny for me to say, like, why don't they want to go to sleep? Like, I'll use an example. There was a time where I was extremely busy, and the time that my kids got the most concentrated attention was at bedtime, right? And so then they don't want to go to sleep because the longer they stay awake, the more they'll get like proper, deep, connected attention, right? That then becomes a thing of like, the reason I need you to go to sleep is for this. Then how can we get more connection during the day, and how can we make the most of the connection time that we have so that you get as much as you can in the time that we have, so that you're ready to go to sleep at the time that's good for your body, right? And as I say, that it's not necessarily simple to find the solution, but once we find the need, then it's easier to stay calm and it's easier to be creative. We go siblings bickering in the car. The tricky part about siblings bickering in the car is that often what you've got is two people who don't know how to express what they need, right? Two people who don't know, excuse me one second, two people who don't know how to communicate what they need and find the solution, right? So that's where, as if you can do it while you're driving safely, it becomes, for each expression they make, we're looking for what are you trying to say about what you need, right? And helping them to understand each other. And again, if it can't happen, we need to come up with a way for them to not be speaking in the car if it's not safe for you, right? Again, not necessarily a quick and simple process. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But we really, when they're bickering, it's like, why are you bickering? Are you dysregulated? Does that mean we need to go to the park before we go home? right? Is it, and there's so many reasons, right, for the bickering. It's like, where's the bickering starting? Is it both of them, or is one person starting it? And why is that one person starting it? If we look at, it's time to stop playing and eat dinner. So if we look at what are the potential solutions, so one of the ones that I said earlier was bringing the Lego to the table, and it's entirely a personal choice as to whether you allow that or whether you don't. Some parents are comfortable with it, some parents aren't. If you're not comfortable with that, what else? Right? So it's not interesting. What would make it interesting? Can we play silly songs? Can we do this? Can we do that? A lot of parents can struggle with dinner time because they want it to be family connecting time. It's very difficult to want to connect with someone who just told you you have to stop doing what you want to do and do what I want to do, which is connecting right now, right? So we're looking for, what does that mean? Am I trying to get connection because I feel like we should have connection once a day? Or am I trying to build a family, what's the word? Not routine, a family, I can't think of the word. Hopefully you can think of it. But it's like a family ritual. That's the word I'm thinking. A family ritual where dinner time is connection. Well, then how do we make that so that it's also good for your child so they want to participate in it? Right. Um, and then teeth brushing, right? So we look at, maybe it's a sensory nightmare for your child versus if I brush my teeth, then I have to put my pajamas on and then I have to go into bed and I don't want to go to bed, right? So we're problem solving that. If it's let's say, like, why do I have to brush my teeth? Like, I don't see anyone else brushing their teeth, right? Well, the baby doesn't have teeth. Mummy and daddy do it just before we go to bed because we after you go to bed, sometimes I have a cup of tea, so I have to make sure I brush my teeth after my cup of tea, right? Or uh yeah, so we're looking for each of these times, like, what is the root cause? What is the reason? A big one with teeth brushing is also the executive functioning skills. So if your child appears to be old enough to do the task but gets distracted or just doesn't do it, we want to be looking for, are they capable of keeping their attention fixed on a task until completion? And you would be surprised. So a parent will always say to me, but if they want to play Lego, they'll play for hours, but they can't concentrate for 2 minutes to get their teeth brushed. Yes, because they're motivated to play and they're not motivated to brush their teeth. And doing something that you're not motivated to do is an executive functioning skill, not a capacity to have a um, longer span of attention, right? Those it's two different things, right? So if that's an attention span issue, how can we do it so that they can stay focused? What routines can we come up with that works for them? Um, Beautiful. Okay, so when we can't get the need met, so there are times, sometimes it's truly impossible. As I say, I feel like in a lot of circumstances, it's just because we don't have the time to come up with a solution or put in place what we need to have in place in order to have that solution working. But I assume that it is probably impossible some of the time, but also a lot of the time it's just not enough time to figure it out, right? And so if the need can't be met, we want to reinforce that their needs matter. Oh, sweetie, I really wish we had a fun way for you to get your teeth brushed. I'm so sorry that we can't come up with an option today. And notice I said can't come up with an option today. I'm not doing the toxic positivity thing of like every time someone says I can't do that, you can't do it yet. There's a difference between maybe we'll be able to come up with an option tomorrow versus don't forget there's always another chance. Like, we're not trying to make it into a positive when it's not, but we are reinforcing that maybe we will come up with an idea tomorrow. Let them know that you would if you could. So, sweetie, I absolutely would let you go to the park with no shoes on if I could. I'm just so worried that your feet will get something sharp in them and would get hurt. And so if I could let you go to the park with no shoes on, I would let you go to the park with no shoes on. As always, I use too many words. You don't have to use so many words. Clearly explain what is in the way. So we're just reinforcing what is the barrier that they need to overcome. And if you really can't get the need met, you need to make a decision. So again, together make a decision, or just you. What am I going to do about this? So I want to let's say I want to unpack all the Tupperware out of the drawer, right? And you're trying to understand, what is the need underneath of that? Are they angry that they didn't get what they needed, and so they're trying to express that anger? Or is it that it's the most fun thing to do? If you're not sure, right? Or you can see why they want to do it, but you can't get them to focus on a solution because they're too little. Then your decision might be, I'm just going to what they call be the gate, which is basically, the concept of a baby gate. The baby gate is not trying to teach the baby not to go down the hallway. The baby gate is not trying to explain to the baby why they should not want to go down the hallway. The baby gate is not trying to change the baby's behavior. The baby gate is just blocking the way, right? And so then we can be the gate and just block the way, right? Or the decision might be, this time I may as well let them unpack everything because it's going to take me just as long to hold the boundary as it is to pack it away. And today, I'd rather just get the dinner cooked. That's okay, right? We're just making the best decision we can. And sometimes that will mean you acquiesce, and sometimes it will mean they acquiesce, and you're just going to make the best decision that you can. Now, if they have big feelings about not being able to do what they want or having to do what you want, if you have the time and energy to empathize in the moment, do it then. And if you don't, do it later. So in that moment, you're going to hold space for those feelings, empathize with it, and help them to regulate. If you cannot do that because you're in a rush or you just do not have it in you, later on, talk about, when you wanted to unpack the drawer and I didn't want you to, I'm so sorry that it was frustrating for you. Now, again, if your child is too little to remember what was happening 4 hours ago, I still recommend it because you're practicing. What are the words I use when I want to bring up something that happened earlier? What are the words I want to use to express why I had to make the decision that I did? What are the words that I would use to reinforce that their needs matter and we want to find a solution? Want to reflect their feelings and needs in that empathy. So I can see you're so frustrated because you just need to have fun and you don't want to eat dinner right now. Right? Now they are allowed to stay in the feelings. You are like it's not a requirement that if you say you can't do something that they have to be comfortable with it. They're allowed to stay frustrated. They're allowed to not make a decision that will, resolve the issue. They're allowed to not take any of the options. Like it's okay, right? They're allowed to stay in those feelings. Now, what happens when we are not able to stay calm, right? We want to stay calm, but we can't. There's 4 main reasons. So the first thing is we think they're being unreasonable. If you think they're being unreasonable, that means you're not paying attention to their need, right? Either you haven't found the need, you haven't gone deep enough, or you're not thinking about that. You're thinking about how they should want to acquiesce, right? Not your fault. That's how we've been raised. The next reason is that we feel stuck. Now, sometimes the problem can't be solved, and the problems don't have to be solved every time. We make a decision, we reinforce the reason we can't, and we empathize. The more practice you have, the easier this will get. The quicker it will get, the better at solving the root problem you will get. And so you'll get stuck less and less often. So just reinforcing to yourself that it's okay. Sometimes we're not going to get to the bottom of it, and that's okay. The next one is that we resent that our needs aren't met. And we need to then focus on solutions that work for both of you. Just because you're clear on their needs doesn't mean that you have to do what they want. We want to also be clear on what are your needs, and we want to protect your needs when you'll lose your cool otherwise, and protect their needs when you can. So that's how we choose who should acquiesce. The reason I say only to protect your needs when you'll lose your cool otherwise is because your child, the way they will be treated by most likely everybody else in their life is like they should do this or they should do that. And so we want to, as much as we can, we want to reinforce that their needs are important and we want to prioritize them. Now, sometimes I said only when you lose your cool. Obviously, there are other kind of practical things like, sunscreen or safety or, there's things where we can't actually acquiesce. But also, if you're going to lose your cool, it is much better for you to be able to stay calm and they lose their cool than other way around, right? So ideally, we're looking for what works for both of you. But if we can't, we want to prioritize your being cool, calm, and collected. Now, another reason we lose our cool is that we've acquiesced, thinking that if we acquiesce enough, then they will acquiesce, right? Then when we finally hold the boundary, we don't have any energy left for problem solving or to hold space for their feelings about it. Right? You see this with, I'll give you 5 more minutes. Yes, we can stay 5 more minutes in the park. Okay, five. Are you sure we really need to do it 5 more minutes? Okay, finally, we have to go now. No, we have to. And you see how we let it, we acquiesce and acquiesce and acquiesce, and then we've got nothing left. Either we've got no time left, or we've got no energy left, right? So there's no acquiescing. We problem solve or we make a decision. One of the two. We problem solve to find a way that works for both of us, or if we can't find a way that works for both of us, we decide this is the best available option we have right at this moment. Now, if we focus on handling those four things, most of you will be able to be calm much more consistently than you are now. Now, will I have time for this? Whenever there's no time to negotiate, just make a decision, right? Come back to reinforce that their needs are important. This is the best option we have right now. When there's time to talk about it, you can talk about what options might have worked. The more you do this practice of talking about it later, the more clarity you'll get on both of your needs, and also the more options you'll have, the more ideas that might work next time. You're also building the neural connections almost as much as if you've done it in the moment. So it becomes your default behavior. It doesn't mean that's something that you have to remember. It's just how you operate. And it becomes easier and easier over time. Now, the more often your child recognizes that you're trying to meet both of your needs, and their needs, and also the more often that their needs get met, the easier it is for them to accept the times when their needs can't get met. That means they won't have as many big feelings. You won't have to empathize for a long. You won't have to help them regulate. They'll be able to say, well, that's really, and depending on their age, they'll be able to say, that's really frustrating, but all right, right? And the more they'll be able to get through here. Now, also, most people, so we're talking about not just kids, but also us as adults, we have just a few needs that are either the ones that are persistently unmet right now, or they're the ones that are the most important to us individually. And that means that once you've identified those needs, like most of the time, it's going to be like, well, is it autonomy? Because I know that's really important to you, right? Like, or is that connection? Because I know we're not getting as much one-on-one time as you generally need, right? You get to know that you're not having to spend so much time finding what the issue is, because you know it's going to be one of these three most of the time. It'll also only take so long to find ways to get both their needs and your needs met and consistently in the routine parts of life. So most parents that I've talked to, there's a few things that come up all the time, right? Once we get to a point where we're getting those needs met creatively most of the time, like it's just not as often, it's just not coming up as often, right? If it's getting to bed, if it's brushing their teeth, right? You only have to solve this one time and then it's done. It's not ongoing negotiations for hours and hours. And then we only need to problem solve when things change. So if they get older and go through a new developmental stage, or something about your life situation changes, like you move house, they go to a new room at daycare, there's a breakup or a new partner, like something changes, then we have to negotiate again. But generally speaking, we just fall into routines and everything works for both of us. So we don't have to have this conflict all the time. And even those times where you have to get back into negotiation, the more you practice this, the quicker you get at identifying needs and finding creative solutions. So it's not something that you have to spend a lot of time on for the rest of your life. I think that's one of the biggest things about biggest bugbears I have with gentle parenting these days, is it appears as though it's just going to be hard, and it's just going to be hard for years. And it doesn't have to be that way. Like once we get to the root cause of the problems, we find a way that works for both of us, and we have a much easier life, a much more connected life, and everything's working in a much more streamlined way. So if you've got any questions at all, I'd love you to send me an email and just let me know based on what you've heard from this webinar. What came up for you? Where did you get stuck? What's an issue for your child? And I'd love to know, can you see we're fundamentally changing the way we cooperate with our kids? Instead of deciding whose turn it is to acquiesce, we're solving the problem in a way that works for both of us. When we can't solve the problem, our children experience feeling deeply heard, seen, and understood. We keep our cool, and they're not at risk of becoming people pleasers or letting go of who they really are. And this sets them up to be able to problem solve with other people right now. So their other parent, their siblings, their friends, other adults in their lives. And it also helps them to help to set them up with the skills to manage conflict in their relationships when they're older. This is such a big shift, and it really makes a difference for like you and for your child. And so if you'd like my support to implement this together, I recommend we do this over 4 weeks. And in that time, so we do one session a week over 4 weeks. And in that time, we can recognize the needs at play in your most common tricky spots. But if you're struggling to figure out, like they're just saying, I don't want to, or they're too little to tell me how they're feeling, or they're saying things, but it doesn't really feel like it's the need that's at play. I have been doing this work for 10 years now, 10, no, 9 years now. I lie. I've been doing this work for 9 years now. I am very skilled at either being able to spot what the need is or give you some things to try that will mean we figure out the need very quickly, right? And once we've got those needs, then it's easier for us to find the solutions. Because I've been doing this for so long, and also like part of it is practice because I've helped so many parents over the years, but part of it also is that because I'm not so close to it, it's much easier for me to come up with a creative solution because I'm not in the rut. I'm not seeing the forest for the trees. Like it's much easier because I'm not in it with you, that sometimes I can see solutions that parents will say, oh, I totally could have thought of that. But of course you don't, because you're doing it day in and day out. I can also help you to get really confident at those times when there's no solution. How do you make the best decision you can? And then that way, getting them to listen doesn't take so much time, and that you can stay calm. I'll also help you to build your skills to hold space for their feelings so they can accept a no without like an ongoing tantrum or without it being a really big deal. We can do that together over 4 weeks. Now, if we've done all of those things, for most parents, you actually don't get reactive as often. You don't actually lose your cool so often. It happens much more rarely. For some parents, for a variety of reasons, we do still get overwhelmed and we do still get into that reactive space. And so if you still need it, we can talk about strategies to manage your emotions so you can keep your cool even when things go wrong. And so over those 4 weeks, we can get all of those things working together so that some kids will be listening 100% of the time on those, the things that happen most commonly. So some kids will be able to go to bed and get to sleep easily in those times. For some kids, for the bulk of kids, we make a lot of progress so that they're listening so much more often. And then of the times that you would have lost your cool, you're losing your cool so much less often. And for some of the trickiest situations, so if we have a situation where practically you're going through a really rough time and you like the bigger picture of your lives, or you're going through a tough time with your own emotional regulation for other reasons other than parenting, or there's reasons why it's just a trickier situation, we might not get to a place where it's like light night and day, but we will make progress. In those 4 weeks, we can make this so much easier for you so that, you've got that time to be, having a cup of tea or, connecting more, creating those memories. And, we're just making life so much easier. So if that's something that you'd like to do, I'm doing a special offer at the moment. I've got 5 spaces at just $197 for those 4 sessions. And if you'd like to do that, just reply to the email with this recording and we'll get you booked in and we'll get you started. So I would really like to support you to get your children to be listening for the right reasons and keep those qualities in them that will serve them so well when they're older, but not make that like it doesn't have to be a question of do I sacrifice who I am in order to get along well with other people. That's where we want to actually shift that. It's not an either or. We can keep their personality and make things much more easy for them to get along, both with you and with everybody else. But thank you so much for listening. And as I said, send through any questions by email. I'd love to support you as we go.